Yesterday was a significant day for me, for it was the 7th anniversary of my priesthood. Now, it was obviously a day of exuberance because there had been so much preparation, prayer, study, anticipation, and then the moment came. Now, one of the pivotal moments in my life came very simply. So, I was born in Regina, and the parish we had gone to, where I was baptized at, was called St. Mary's. Now, in the place where the priest's robe, called the sacristy, there was a little message there which really struck with me in terms of the importance of what a priest does primarily to celebrate the Mass. For it says here, priest of God, say this Mass as if it were your first Mass, as if it were your last Mass, as if it were your only Mass. And for me, it kind of struck me, okay, something that the priest does is significant. I thought, I want to do that. And so here is the finished product. So in the midst of that exuberance, however, had I known 7 years ago what I would be doing today and the whole journey, I don't know if I would have said yes so exuberantly. But I think it's always important to go to the kind of that moment of exuberance. Just like for those who've ever been married, it's a great day of exuberance and joy. And at the same time, yeah, the struggles do come. But if we remember that initial exuberance, I think it gives us a great deal of hope and joy. I think so. My life is an example of St. Paul, what he says in today's second reading. We live by faith, not by sight. And yeah, that's the only way to really thrive in our life. Now, if we look at the life of St. Paul, 14 of the 27 books in the New Testament were composed by his hand. If it weren't for St. Paul and his missionary journeys, we wouldn't have the faith as we have it today. So we're very, very thankful. We have to be for what St. Paul did. Now, like I was when I was a little boy, or even when I was ordained 7 years ago yesterday, yeah, it was a day of it. So Paul experienced that on his road to Damascus. So he probably was converted to the Christian faith in about the year 33. Now, of course, he also experienced great exuberance when he brought the message to the places in Turkey and in Greece and in Rome, and so he was filled with great joy of the success of it. Also, in about the year 47, second letter to the Corinthians speaks about Paul being taken up to the third heaven. So imagine like having a mystical experience of God. So he had all these experiences. However, if we really appreciate what the successes of Paul really entailed, I think we would have a better appreciation of what he did, of walking by faith and not by sight. Now, the second letter to the Corinthians was written about the year 57 or so, a year after the first letter to the Corinthians was written. Now, the first letter to the Corinthians really looks at the inner life of the church in Corinth, and it reveals of what the bad things that were going on, the good things. The second letter to the Corinthians is not just from the perspective of a church community, but in his own life. It's probably the most revealing and personal of all of St. Paul's writings, because it seems to be he's being ground down by the burdens of his ministry. Yeah, the exuberance of his conversion and following the Lord, but then after 24 years of missionary activity, he's getting tired. He's really suffering immensely. And so, had we read the first part of today's passage from the 5th chapter, 2nd letter to the Corinthians, Paul speaks about the groaning of this earthly tent, of his body. He's tired because he wants to be clothed with his heavenly dwelling. Because even as he notes in today's passage, even though he's in the body here, he wants to get to heaven. That's his ultimate goal. And Paul confides in the Corinthians that of his struggles. So he speaks about his imprisonments, his beatings, his hungers, his anxieties for many of the churches, being shipwrecked as well. So this initial exuberance is kind of being lost in the sufferings that he's undergoing. But I think for Paul, he walks by faith and not by sight. He knows in a moment of exuberance when he was converted to the faith in year 33, his life changed. He knew that God loved him. And so that was what enabled him to go through all the struggles of sharing this good news with so many others. And he'll even note that as he shares in the sufferings of Christ, he also shares in his consolation. At the very beginning of the letter, he does say that inasmuch as we are that the Lord consoles us in all our afflictions, we are then therefore able to console others in the measure that we have received consolation from him. So Paul's saying, hey, we're all suffering, we're all struggling, but we got to walk by faith and not by sight, because we know what happens at the end if we remain true to that. So how do we walk by faith and not by sight? Okay, Paul did it. Now what about us? You know, it's not easy to walk by faith and not by sight, because we know that it's easy to get discouraged. Many times in my 7 years of priesthood, boy, I felt very much discouraged. I think it's a matter of perspective, of walking truly by faith and not by sight. So how do we do it? Especially we have 2 young people being baptized, and so they're going to be experiencing moments where they think, well, where is the Lord in all this? How can I keep on this faith journey? And I think one great way, probably the best way that we can do it, is being here today, is being encouraged by the examples of St. Paul and all the writings of the Scriptures, being fed with the Eucharist, that the Lord comes into our bodies, and also we are church. And the churches are those who hear the voice of God, who are called by God and are here. Because St. Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians says, if one suffers, all suffer. If one rejoices, all rejoice. So when people are suffering and struggling with faith, hey, there are others who are strong and being consoled. Okay, let me console them, and vice versa. And so when it comes to being ground down by this life of faith, I think, well, where's the Lord in all this? You know, I'm walking by faith, but by sight it's difficult because I can't see past this. And when it comes to tragedies like this community has experienced with the death of Jaden Summerfeld, I think, whoa, how can any good come out of this? And I think we have to walk by faith and not by sight. The Lord is with us. And so we can truly be encouraged that we can walk by faith, that the Lord is indeed with us, as he was with St. Paul, if we have that perspective. So when we're here today, it helps us rest in the Lord and puts a perspective on our faith. Okay, the Lord's in charge. We ask that his will be done. Okay. And so as we are consoled, we in turn are to console others who are struggling and say, okay, the Lord is indeed with you. It's okay. I don't know what's going on, but let's just trust in the Lord. And so 7 years ago, I celebrated my first Mass. And always reminding myself, hey, the significance of my ministry. A priest of God, celebrate this Mass as if it were your first Mass, your last Mass, and your only Mass. So it's a matter of perspective. And I think, imagine if we were to live our lives and say it in a similar way. You know, live this life as if it were your first day, your last day, and your only day. Boy, wouldn't that be a perspective? It puts things, it gets rid of all the things that we really worry about that are not essential, and keeps us focused on the essential. And the essence of our lives is faith. So let us continue to walk by faith and not by sight, and in turn encourage those who are struggling to put their perspectives and their hope in God.